This is the story of After the Party. My wife is called The Hole, my revenge on my cheating wife. My name is Jack, and if you looked at my life from the outside, you'd say I had it all. A successful career as an engineer, a beautiful wife named Sarah, and a cozy home in New York. For over a decade, I thought we were happy. Sarah was everything I wasn't: outgoing, spontaneous, always ready to dive into a new adventure. She could light up any room she walked into, and I loved her for it. I was the opposite: more grounded, more focused on routine. Maybe that's why we worked so well together, or so I thought. It started subtly, little shifts that I brushed off at first. Sarah started coming home later than usual. "Work's been crazy," she'd say, kicking off her heels and pouring herself a glass of wine. "Mark's been piling on projects last minute." Mark was her boss. And while I didn't know him well, Sarah talked about him often enough. "He's demanding, but he knows his stuff," she'd say. "He's the kind of leader who pushes you to be better." I didn't think much of it at first. Sarah had always been ambitious, and her career was thriving. But as the weeks went by, I began noticing other changes. She'd spend hours on her phone, her face lighting up with messages she claimed were just work stuff. One evening, I came home earlier than expected. Sarah was in the kitchen, humming a tune as she prepared dinner. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and I caught a glimpse of the name on the screen. "Mark." "Busy day?" I asked casually, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. She turned, her smile bright but a little too quick. "Oh yeah, just trying to wrap things up before the holidays." Something felt off, but I told myself I was imagining things. Sarah had always been flirty by nature. It was part of her charm. Besides, we had been through so much together, there was no way she'd betray me. The first real crack appeared during a Saturday brunch with her friends. We were sitting at a small cafe downtown, sipping mimosas and laughing at some story her friend Emma was telling. Then Emma leaned in and said, "So, are you bringing Jack to the office party this year?" Sarah stiffened for just a moment before waving it off. "Oh, I don't think he'll want to come. Work parties aren't really his thing, right, babe?" I smiled politely, but felt a pang of discomfort. She hadn't even mentioned the party to me. That night, I asked her about it. "Why didn't you tell me about the office party?" She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "I just assumed you wouldn't be interested, and it's all boring work talk anyway." Her response seemed reasonable enough, but something about the way she avoided my gaze gnawed at me. For the first time, I felt a flicker of doubt. Over the next few weeks, those flickers turned into something harder to ignore. Sarah started dressing up more for work, skirts a little shorter, makeup a little bolder. She claimed it was because she wanted to look professional, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. One evening, she came home late again, this time smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. "What's that scent?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Oh, probably Mark's," she said, laughing it off. "He leans in too close when he talks sometimes." I laughed along with her, but my mind was racing. Was I being paranoid, or was there something she wasn't telling me? As the holidays approached, Sarah became more distant. She'd disappear into her office for hours, claiming she had endless reports to finish. I wanted to believe her, but a part of me couldn't help but wonder if the late nights and constant texting had more to do with Mark than her workload. By the time the New Year's Eve party rolled around, the tension between us was palpable. She asked me again if I wanted to come, but there was something about the way she said it, like she was hoping I'd say no. That night, I stayed home while Sarah got ready to go. I watched her put on a sleek black dress that hugged her figure perfectly, her reflection glowing in the mirror. She looked stunning, but the knot in my stomach was tighter than ever. "Don't wait up," she said with a quick kiss on my cheek before heading out the door. I sat there in the silence of our living room, staring at the clock and wondering if I was losing my mind. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what. The house felt emptier than usual after Sarah left. I sat on the couch, the TV murmuring in the background, but I wasn't paying attention. My mind was elsewhere. Why did I feel like I had just made a mistake letting her go? Around midnight, I glanced at my phone. No messages from Sarah. She usually texted if she was staying late or needed a ride, but tonight there was nothing. I debated calling her, but something stopped me. I didn't want to seem clingy or paranoid. By the time she came home, it was nearly 2 a.m. I was still awake, pretending to be engrossed in a book. "You're up late," she said, kicking off her heels by the door. Her voice was light, but her cheeks were flushed and her hair was slightly disheveled. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. "How was the party?" She shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "The usual, lots of small talk and cheap champagne." "You smell like champagne," I said with a small smile, though my chest felt tight. Sarah laughed and waved me off. "It spilled on me. Some clumsy intern knocked over a glass." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the unease that had been building for weeks was impossible to ignore. The next morning, she slept in late, while I busied myself around the house. Her phone was charging on the counter, buzzing occasionally with notifications. I wasn't the type to snoop, but something compelled me to glance at the screen. A message from someone named Mark caught my eye. I couldn't see the full text, just the preview. "Last night was amazing. Let's do it again soon." My heart sank. I stepped away from the phone. my hands shaking. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe Mark was talking about the party itself, but deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. Sarah woke up a couple of hours later, cheerful and full of energy. I'm going out with Emma later, she announced over breakfast. Girls' Day. We're going shopping for some post-holiday sales? I nodded, forcing a smile. Sounds fun. As soon as she left, I grabbed my laptop and began digging. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I couldn't sit around and do nothing. I went through her social media, her work profiles, even the photos from last night's party that her coworkers had posted online. Most of it looked innocent enough. Group shots, festive decorations, blurry pictures of people dancing. But then, I found one that made my blood run cold. It was a photo of Sarah standing close to Mark, his arm draped casually over her shoulder. She was laughing, leaning into him, in a way that seemed far too intimate for colleagues. The caption read, "The Dynamic Duo." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting into knots. That evening, when Sarah came home and she was in high spirits carrying a few shopping bags. "You should have seen the deals we got," she said, holding up a new pair of boots. I nodded, trying to act normal. "Looks great." Inside, I was anything but calm. Over the next few days, I became more observant. I started noticing little things I'd ignored before. How Sarah always seemed distracted when we were together, how she'd check her phone and smile at texts she wouldn't share. I began keeping track of her stories. One night, she said she was working late at the office. But when I drove by her building on the way to grab dinner, the lights were off. Another time, she claimed she was meeting Emma for drinks, but Emma posted an Instagram story that night. Alone, at home, binge watching a TV show, the pieces were starting to come together, and the picture they painted wasn't pretty. One Saturday, I decided to confront her. We were sitting on the couch, watching a movie, when I paused it and turned to her. "Sarah," I began carefully, "is there something you want to tell me?" She frowned, clearly confused. "What do you mean?" "You've been distant lately, always on your phone, staying out late. I feel like there's something you're not telling me." Her expression shifted instantly, her eyes narrowing. "What are you accusing me of?" "I'm not accusing you of anything," I said, though my voice trembled. "I just want to know the truth." She stood up abruptly, crossing her arms. "You're being ridiculous, Jack. Do you even hear yourself? I work hard, I have friends, and I'm allowed to have a life outside of this house. That doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong." I wanted to believe her, but the defensive tone, the way she avoided looking at me, it only made my doubts stronger. "Okay," I said quietly, letting the conversation drop. "I just needed to ask." Sarah stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. That night, I made a decision. If Sarah wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was hiding something. Her reaction was too defensive, too rehearsed, and I knew I couldn't just let it go. I started planning, not to catch her in the act, but to understand what was really going on. The following week, Sarah mentioned she had to attend a business dinner with Mark and a few colleagues. She explained it casually over breakfast, but there was an edge to her voice, like she was testing how I'd react. "When's the dinner?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Friday night," she said, scrolling through her phone. "It's just a networking thing, nothing exciting." I nodded, pretending to be disinterested. "Do you want me to drop you off?" "No, it's fine," she replied quickly. "I'll just meet them there. It's at that restaurant downtown, the one with the rooftop." "Sounds nice," I said, forcing a smile. That Friday, I left work early, determined to find out if this business dinner was what she claimed. I drove to the restaurant she'd mentioned and parked across the street, keeping a clear view of the entrance. I sat there for over an hour, watching as people arrived. A few were in business attire, clearly there for professional reasons. But there were also couples holding hands and groups laughing together. It didn't look like a strictly work-related event. Finally, I saw her. Sarah stepped out of a cab, looking stunning in a sleek red dress that clung to her figure. It was far too glamorous for a simple networking dinner. She paused outside the restaurant, checking her phone, and moments later, Mark appeared. He greeted her with a smile and a kiss on the cheek. Too close, too familiar. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I watched them head inside together, her arm brushing against his as they walked. I didn't follow them in. Part of me didn't want to see what might happen next. Instead, I sat there staring at the restaurant, my thoughts racing. When Sarah came home that night, she was cheerful, humming a tune as she kicked off her heels. "How was your night?" she asked, glancing at me on the couch. "Quiet," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "How was dinner?" "Oh, it was fine," she said, shrugging. "Just the usual boring work stuff." I didn't press her for details. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I needed more than a hunch, more than just the kiss I'd seen. Over the next few weeks, I became more methodical. I started keeping track of her schedule, noting the days she stayed late at work or went out with friends. I even downloaded a tracking app on her phone, disguised as a harmless weather app. I hated how sneaky it felt, but I needed answers. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. One night, when she said she was meeting Emma, I saw her location ping at a luxury hotel downtown. She didn't come home until after midnight, claiming they'd gone to a late movie. Another time, she said she was working late, but the tracking app showed her at Mark's apartment building. When I asked how work was, she sighed and complained about spreadsheets. The lies came so easily to her, and I realized this wasn't just a one-time mistake. This was a pattern, something she'd been doing for a long time. By now, I'd collected enough evidence to confirm my suspicions, photos, screenshots, timestamps, but I didn't want to confront her at home, where she could lie her way out of it. I needed a moment where she couldn't escape the truth. That opportunity came sooner than I expected. Sarah's company was hosting another party, a follow-up to the New Year's Eve event. This time it was a formal dinner and she invited me along. "It's going to be boring," she said, rolling her eyes. "But they're expecting spouses, so you might as well come," I agreed, masking my emotions. This wasn't just a party. It was my chance to expose everything. I spent the days leading up to the event preparing. I compiled every piece of evidence I had, photos of her at the hotel, screenshots of her texts with Mark, even a video I'd taken of her leaving his apartment late one night. I put it all in a folder and tucked it into my briefcase. The night of the party, Sarah looked stunning as always. She wore a black dress with a plunging neckline, her hair swept up elegantly. "You clean up well," she said with a playful smile as we left the house. "So do you," I replied, though my stomach churned at the thought of what the night would bring. At the venue, Sarah immediately slipped into hostess mode, introducing me to her coworkers and laughing at their jokes. I kept my composure, shaking hands and making small talk, but my eyes were always on her and Mark. They were careful, keeping their distance in public, but I caught the small, telling gestures, a lingering glance, a hand brushing hers as they passed each other. It was all the confirmation I needed. Halfway through the evening, I excused myself and found a quiet corner to make a call. I had hired a bailiff earlier that week to serve Sarah with the divorce papers, along with the evidence of her infidelity. She was waiting outside, ready to walk in at my signal. When I returned to the party, Sarah was chatting with Mark near the bar. Her laughter too loud, her smile too white. I walked over and placed my hand on her shoulder. "Sarah," I said, my voice calm but firm, "we need to talk." Sarah turned to me, her expression faltering for a split second before she composed herself. "Can it wait?" she asked, her voice light but edged with irritation. "Oh, we're in the middle of something." Mark glanced between us, his confident smirk unwavering. "It's fine, Sarah," he said smoothly. "Go handle whatever you need to." I clenched my jaw but forced a polite nod in his direction. "It won't take long," I assured her. She sighed dramatically, but followed me to a quieter part of the venue. Away from the chatter and clinking glasses, I led her to a small alcove near the coat room where we were out of earshot but still visible enough to avoid causing a scene. "What's so urgent, Jack?" she asked, crossing her arms. Her tone was dismissive, as if she were indulging a minor inconvenience. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the envelope containing the divorce papers and the evidence I'd gathered. Her eyes darted to the envelope, then back to my face, confusion flashing across her features. "What's this?" she asked, her voice wary now. "Open it," I said simply. She hesitated, then took the envelope and carefully slid out the contents. Her eyes scanned the first page, her brow furrowing as she read. Then she flipped through the photos. The hotel, Mark's apartment, the texts. Her face went pale, her mouth opening slightly as if to say something, but no words came out. I waited, letting the weight of the evidence settle over her. "Jack," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't what it looks like." I laughed bitterly. "Really? Because it looks like my wife has been lying to me for months, maybe years. It looks like you've been sneaking around behind my back with your boss, and God knows who else." She shook her head frantically, shoving the papers back at me. "This isn't fair. You don't understand. Don't you dare tell me I don't understand," I snapped, my voice rising. "I've seen everything, Sarah. I've been watching while you've lied to my face over and over again." She stepped closer, her hands outstretched as if to calm me. "Jack, please, just listen to me, Mark. He doesn't mean anything. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice cold. "How many times, Sarah? How many mistakes did it take for you to destroy our marriage?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. "You weren't there," she cried. "You were always working, always busy. I needed someone who made me feel seen, who made me feel wanted. And you thought the solution was to cheat on me?" I asked incredulously. "To throw away everything we built together because you felt neglected?" Her lips trembled, but she didn't deny it. I took a step back, shaking my head. "You know what, Sarah? Save your excuses. I didn't just bring you here to have this conversation." Her brows knitted together in confusion. "What do you mean?" Before I could answer, a voice rang out from behind us. "Sarah Williams." We both turned to see a woman in a sharp black suit striding toward us, a folder tucked under her arm. It was the bailiff I'd hired. "Yes," Sarah said uncertainly, glancing at me. The woman stopped in front of her and opened the folder. "You are hereby served with divorce papers on behalf of your husband, Jack Williams." She handed Sarah the documents, her tone professional but firm. "The included materials detail evidence of infidelity, which will be submitted in court Should you contest the terms? Sarah's face crumpled as she clutched the papers, her hands shaking. Jack, you can't do this, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please, let's talk about this. We can fix it. It's too late, Sarah, I said, my voice steady. I gave you my trust, my love, my loyalty, and you threw it all away. There's nothing left to fix. By now, a few guests had noticed the commotion. I could hear whispers spreading through the crowd, the occasional gasp as people began piecing together what was happening. Sarah turned toward them, her face a mixture of panic and humiliation. Jack, please, she begged, her voice hoarse. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. This isn't just about us, Sarah. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed your own integrity, your coworkers, even your reputation. People are going to know exactly who you are after this. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but I didn't waver. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, clutching the papers as the weight of her actions came crashing down. As I passed through the crowd, I caught Mark's eye. His confident smirk had vanished, replaced by a look of unease. I didn't stop, didn't say a word, but I knew this wasn't over for him either. The night wasn't just the end of my marriage, it was the start of something new. A life where I wouldn't be anyone's fool ever again. The divorce papers, the confrontation, it was all done. I wasn't just ending a chapter of my life. I was closing a door on the past and opening myself up to a future I had never imagined. The streets of New York, usually so overwhelming, now felt wide open, full of possibility. I didn't know what would come next. Maybe I'd take a trip, maybe start over in a new city, or maybe just find a new way of being myself without the lies and the pretense. And